be here. It's a great time to be in Ghana. We're hosting almost 40 nations in the All Africa Games. Ghana is the gateway to Africa, hopefully the destination as well. IMF MD, we're happy to have you. Thank you for being here with us. In Ghana, we begin our programs with an opening prayer, and I want to invite the Communications Advisor for the Ministry of Finance, Ms. Ruth Botio, to lead us in a quick opening prayer. Please put your hands together for her.
Thank you, Bernard. Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, Madam IMF MD, Honorable Ministers, I stand on all existing protocols. Shall we bow our heads for a short word of prayer, please? Our Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, and we thank you for a safe and successful trip so far for the IMF MD and her team. Thank you for the discussions that have been held during this trip towards entrenching Ghana's stability, ensuring a resilient recovery, and promoting inclusive growth. And now, Heavenly Father, we commit this event into your hands. As we engage on artificial intelligence, the next frontier of divinely inspired human achievement, we ask that your Holy Spirit chairs this summit and all our efforts as a nation and continent geared towards catalyzing accelerated development through AI. May the grit and commitment of our forebears guide each and every one of us to always put Ghana and Africa first in our hearts, our minds, and the work of our hands. In the mighty name of Yeshua we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Please put your hands together for Ruth. It's a long walk as she goes back to her seat. Welcome again to our viewers online to this conversation. As I said earlier, everybody is in Ghana. The AU is just next door with their meeting. We apologize for the noise. The Africa Games are here. But the IMF is also here in two ways. We are in the middle of an IMF program, and the ministry that's been hosting and leading that conversation is really the co-host for today's event. It is my distinguished honor to invite our newly minted minister. Few things about him. His appointment was not a surprise because he was the Minister of State at the ministry. But for those of us in the media and in the civil society space, we're happy with his appointment because of his previous work in civil society. So typically, ministers of finance have big knives to make cuts. But because he's worked with civil society, he understands pro-poor policies a bit. So hopefully, whatever he cuts, he will still give a soft landing to those who don't have enough money in their pockets. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome our Minister of Finance, MP for Karaga, the Honorable Mohammed Amin Adam, to bring us our official welcome for today's program. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Bernard. You've never been friendly with me. Anytime I appear on your program, you fire at me so hard. Our very distinguished guest, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, colleague ministers, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, members of the diplomatic community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to today's event. We are privileged to have the IMF Managing Director, Kristalina, with us. I think I speak on behalf of all African finance ministers and our governments when I say Kristalina is an admired and true friend of the African continent. Over the last few years, she's been a reassuring advocate for the continent. As economies face cascading crises, her leadership, commitment, and passion for the African cause push the international development community to deliver the multiples of financing Africa needed to help stabilize our economies. Kristalina, we remain forever grateful to you and want to thank you once again for joining us on this momentous occasion. For everyone else here today, especially the members of our upcoming panel, I'm deeply honored that you are here with us to shape opinions and provide insights into how artificial intelligence can drive sustainable development and economic growth on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the fourth industrial revolution is here with us, and it is here to stay. As an offshoot, artificial intelligence is leading to fundamental changes in the way people live, work, and relate to one another, thanks to data-driven algorithms. Since last Thursday, almost 13 countries on our continent are experiencing disruptions in data services. The impact on economic activities is obvious. Electronic payments and delivery services have been disrupted. Public service and general information exchange has also been affected. And we are deeply feeling how much technology impacts our lives. It is in this connection that I highlight the efforts of my colleague, the Honorable Ursula Owusu, our Minister for Communications and Digitalization, for her exemplary efforts towards the development of our technology landscape. Under her leadership, the ICT sector's contribution to GDP has risen from 4.4 billion Ghana cedis in 2016 to 21 billion Ghana cedis in 2022, approximately 4% of GDP. Having said that, I also want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Patrick Awuah, the president of Ashesi University, and Dr. Jason Hickey, the head of Google's AI Research Center, for their presence today. Their sustained efforts towards equipping our young people with the skills and experiences to take on the tech revolution and drive progress across our country is admirable. Ladies and gentlemen, by the numbers, artificial intelligence is forecast to contribute up to $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, of which $1.2 trillion could be generated in Africa, thereby making AI one of the biggest economic opportunities available to our continent. We are truly in an era where new innovations will continue to surprise. This presents us with opportunities to not only address long-standing challenges, but also unlock new avenues for progress, the likes of which our forefathers could never have imagined. From enhancing healthcare through drone-based delivery of medical supplies, or leveraging spatial data and precision farming techniques to enhance agricultural output for the 33 million smallholder farmers on the continent, the applications of AI are as vast as they are promising. However, we must acknowledge that the risk of immediate AI-related disruptions will be higher across the developing world if we are not readily equipped to harness the benefits of AI effectively. At the moment, there is demand-supply imbalance on AI skills across Africa. And to paraphrase from His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Digital Vice President of Ghana, in an article in The Guardian last year on the potential of artificial intelligence, and I quote, "It is critical that this AI revolution is driven by locally led solutions and brains, for we cannot sit back and wait for the rest of the world to reap our rewards," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the context within which today's discussions will be held. Ladies and gentlemen, around the objective in Ghana, we want to leverage AI to harness the ingenuity and talents of our people so we can build a self-sufficient, safe, and prosperous society capable of delivering jobs and dignified future for our people. We have seen pragmatic innovations in Ghana, such as the Ghana Card, mobile money interoperability, the National Digital Addressing System, Ghana Gov platform for payment of government services implemented by the government of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. The Ministry of Finance is also exploring how to leverage AI in public financial management through automated budgeting, predictive revenue forecasting, and real-time expenditure tracking. Ghana and several other African countries are looking to collaborate with development partners such as the IMF, World Bank, and the Africa Development Bank, among others, to provide funding, technical and implementation support for AI projects, as well as the development of national AI strategies tailored to our unique needs. Let me use this opportunity to thank the Tony Blair Institute for their immense technical and logistical support in putting this conference together. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cognizant of the fact that, as tools, AI systems are fully under the control and responsibility of their owners or users. As such, we will aim to incorporate accountability, responsibility, and transparency principles and push for stronger and ethical regulation of AI systems. In truth, our continent has already proved its ability when it comes to technological developments, as seen with mobile money and internet access. Today, the World Bank suggests AI could potentially increase global GDP by up to 14% by 2030, with Sub-Saharan Africa poised to benefit significantly. Viewed within that lens, AI technologies present a unique opportunity for Africa to accelerate productivity and reimagine its economic growth, which is more than ever vital for the welfare of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I believe that now is the time to seize the immense opportunities that AI presents to create a future where African innovation knows no bounds. I only ask that governments, the private sector, development partners, and academia continue to prioritize working together to ensure we unlock an independent, wealthy future for Africa where technology removes the obstacles that preclude our people and indeed our nations from realizing our potential. I thank you and I welcome you. Akwaba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. A program like this has a lot of important people. We don't even want to go through any list, but I think it's important to just mention a few people for acknowledgement purposes. Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Madam Elsie Ado-Abaji, is here with us. Let's acknowledge her with a round of applause. Thank you. We have the ambassadors of many, many countries. I won't mention the names, but ambassadors, just give us a wave. We're happy to have you here. Thank you, Madam Virginia Palmer, German, and all of those. Thank you very much indeed. We have a strong IMF delegation as well. Mr. Abebe, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. He's our African man from Ethiopia as well. And of course, the team of media people who are covering this live. This week, there's a lot of things competing for news. The AU is there, the sport is there, but the media have promised to make IMF a big topic. Let's put our hands together for the media guys at the back. Now, computers used to be just glorified calculators many years ago until AI came around. And of course, we know what AI does. AI helps us classify content, search was made better. But with generative AI, computers are threatening to outthink human beings. And it appears we are not ready for this. The IMF MD wrote a paper which spelled out the urgency for nations to begin to think more deeply about AI. And so today we're here to reflect on what this AI revolution means, not just for the world, but for Sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly Ghana that we're in. We are blessed to have a very rich panel. I'm going to introduce the panelists briefly, and then we'll jump right in. We are happy to have the Minister for Communication and Digitalization, herself a lawyer, many years experience. She's a minister for this portfolio since 2017. Prior to this, she did some really good advocacy work with places like FIDA. She's a member of parliament as well. Please help me welcome Honorable Ursula Owusu-Ekuful. Please come up. Please thank you for Madam Ursula. Thank you very much. I don't know if they ask you to sit next to me because of the outage situation. Maybe they are hinting me how to start the panel, but no pressure. Thank you for being here. We're also very happy to have, of course, the MD of the IMF, Madam Kristalina Georgieva. Thank you for being here. Please put your hands together. We're happy to have you. You're the first emerging market IMF MD, and we're happy. Long may it continue. Tell somebody, long may it continue. You don't seem excited. Thank you for being here. Now, we have a man we're very proud of, and when there are complex issues in Ghana that we don't know how to speak to, we invite him. He's the founder of one of our best universities in Africa. He used to work at Microsoft. Patrick Awuah, please put your hands together for him. Dr. Patrick Awuah has distinguished himself as an educationist, technology man, respected all over the world. His university is a place to visit before you leave Ghana. And last but not least, we're privileged to have the head of Google's AI Research Center. I believe you're based in Ghana, right? Dr. Jason Hickey. Put your hands together. Dr. Hickey, it's great to have you. Thank you for being here. It's a good decision to host that center here. The national anthem is playing. Yes, why not?
It's not here, it's on the other side.
So welcome to Ghana.
Please be seated. Thank you very much indeed. Usually when they play the anthem, we put our hands together for the national theme. So let's do that. Just put your hands together. And it's like we didn't have a band, but we have a national anthem. Thank you, Madam MD. I was wondering how to start this, because since you took over in 2019 as the MD, it's been crisis after crisis. COVID has come in. 2021 was a bit of a recovery year. Growth has been low. Now there's inflation. So a listener wanted me to ask you, are you interested in AI because it's an escape for you from all the big problems that you have to solve? Or is there a sense in which this AI thing is the solution to some of the problems you are trying to solve with the low growth and what AI can do? So let's start off with you, Madam.
Let me first thank the honorable ministers and all the those in the audience for being here. I think of AI as the best chance we have to overcome a long period of low productivity and very slow growth. So what is our story? We are in a world that is changing very rapidly, is a more shock-prone world. It demands from policy makers agility and adaptability that was not there in the decades before. And it is presenting to us both incredible challenges like climate change and fabulous opportunities like the green economy and artificial intelligence. I, for one, am optimistic for the future of humanity. We have been able to overcome in the centuries before tremendous challenges, and now is the time to do it again. Fit in this picture. This is the likely largest transformation of our economies that we have experienced since the Industrial Revolution. It can be this big bang that allows us to live longer, healthier, better educated, more productive lives. But it is not given that we would take advantage of the benefits and manage well the risks. We actually face urgently the necessity to embrace artificial intelligence and make the best out of it. And I'm going to make, if you allow me, just 2 points at the start of this. The first one is how concerned we all are at the IMF that growth may be here, this year, next year, the year after, but it is well below the annual average we had in the decade before COVID. Before COVID, the world economy grew on average 3.8%. Now it grows on average around 3%. And what it means is that there is very little to inject improvements in standards of living. When we think of what can lift up productivity, by far our best chance is in investing in the green transition and in the adoption of artificial intelligence. We can see 3, 4, 5% productivity gain if we go forward with artificial intelligence effectively. So this is my first point. We desperately need something that would inject more dynamism in the world economy. Second, we also need to recognize that the scale of impact of artificial intelligence is gigantic. When we looked at the labor market's impact over the next years, in advanced economies, some 60% of jobs would be impacted. In emerging markets, 40%, in low-income countries, 26%. So this is like a tsunami hitting the labor markets. We have to think how we can make the best out of it, prevent artificial intelligence instead of source of good to turn into a source of inequality, misinformation, deep fakes, distortion in our lives.
Thank you for that. And on the last point you made, at the bottom of your report, these 125 countries that you surveyed, it's quite interesting that the countries that are most ready, the Singapores, the Denmarks, the USs, they obviously will face a bigger risk, but they are readier. And then the poorer countries who have a lower risk for their labor markets are not that ready. What are some of the country-specific things that have to be put in place to move a country into greater readiness?
We identified 4 areas where progress has to be made, and different countries are in a different place with regard to those areas. Number 1, digital infrastructure. Without it, it is very difficult to capture the of artificial intelligence. What we know is that digital infrastructure is more advanced in advanced economies. We know that in Africa, on average, access to the internet is still only 50% of the population. Some countries do better, but some countries do worse. Second area, and to me, is the key for success: investment in human capital and in flexible, adaptable labor markets. When we look at countries that have strong, dynamic, agile labor markets and investment not in mechanical learning, but in learning to learn, ability to shift from one task to another, the Denmarks of this world, the Singapores of this world, they're better prepared. 3, innovation and how it fits into entrepreneurship. You can have research and development, but not feeding into the dynamism of the economy. And 4th, regulation and ethics. And what is so interesting to me is when we did our assessment of preparedness, the United States, that is way ahead in terms of advancing artificial intelligence, the so-called Magnificent Seven, the 7 companies that dominate are all in the United States, they did not come up as number 1 in this index. It was Singapore, followed by Denmark. What is in the United States still not quite there? It is actually human capital universally prepared for it, and then, of course, regulation and ethics.
Thank you very much for that, because that segues into my question for Minister Ursula, because digital infrastructure is number 1 on the 4 and it appears to be what the Vice President, yourself, have been drumming home for the past few years. We didn't do that great on the list, but give us a sense of how Ghana, as a case study, is preparing for this AI revolution with your investments in digital infrastructure as an example.
And it's a pleasure to be on this distinguished panel as well. What have we been doing in the past 8 years, 7 years, to prepare ourselves for the onslaught, which is staring us in the face? As you've indicated, digital infrastructure has been big on our agenda, and with the help of our development partners, particularly the World Bank, we've done a lot towards putting in place the critical underpinnings for our digital economy. It's important that we put in place our national ID system. We've done that. We needed a proper addressing system. We've put that in place. We needed to focus on digital financial services and in financial inclusion, and we've worked a lot. We've done a lot towards doing that as well. But absolutely critical to all of that, all these systems would have to work right on the infrastructure underpinning all of that. That's connectivity. And so we've worked with the private sector to extend the network of fiber infrastructure that we have in place. So I see what has happened in the past few days as a bit of a blessing in disguise to focus our attention on the need to invest even more in providing connectivity to all parts of the continent and our country, because it can help us leapfrog. And this is not just a cliche. We did that with banking when we didn't put in place the normal banking infrastructure but moved towards mobile banking. We've done that in a few other areas. And we can use digital infrastructure to transform the economies of the continent if we invest in putting them in place. We've put in place a government connectivity network with the support of the World Bank, which is nationwide. We intend to layer on that and the infrastructure that we already have in place. NITA has fiber. We have the Rural Telephony Program, which is extending connectivity to about 20%, 4 million of our populace across the country that are interconnected. We need to pull all these pieces together and layer on them a robust 4G, 5G network nationwide, which will ensure that all parts of our country, public, private sector, the private sector can also utilize that capacity to fill in the gaps where they are. And what we have learned is absolutely critical these past few days is that we need to build resilience in the connectivity infrastructure that we have in place and look at a mix. We haven't utilized satellite infrastructure or connectivity as much as we should have, largely because of the cost. It's expensive. And so we need to talk to the satellite service providers to see how they can utilize this technology to provide us with some kind of backbone connectivity infrastructure, which will enable us to reach all parts of our country quickly but affordably. Because the internet that we provide has to be accessible, has to be used, and has to be affordable. Otherwise, it is just there, and large parts of our population cannot have access to it.
Thank you for that. The previous point you made about the blessing in disguise, I would like to be like a fly in the next cabinet meeting where road minister is asking for more money, housing minister is asking for more money, and then you say, by the way, there's no connectivity for this meeting, so you know what we're saying. So I can see how this can help you. And also the point about satellite, I think we know a few months ago, one satellite operator who incidentally tried to take a bet on AI has been trying to launch a service here, and the regulator said they were not licensed to operate. This is not a local program, but I'm happy to hear you say that satellite is coming on stream.
Absolutely, it has to.
My substantive question, though, is I'm not sure if the panel was divided because there are two engineers, an economist and a lawyer, right? For most new things, regulation is the issue. Listening to everybody, we're told the regulators don't seem to know really how to catch up with this AI thing. What is Ghana's regulatory readiness? She spoke, for example, about mis and disinformation. A lot of bad things that can happen with this. How is Ghana's regulatory framework being put in place to ensure that the benefits are harvested but the ills are reduced?
Actually, we've been working at this for a while. We have a draft AI strategy and ethics policy, which is currently awaiting cabinet approval and would be utilized. Now, it's important that we carry the population along. If you're in a room full of techies and you're talking about AI, everybody understands what you mean. But people get spooked when you mention the potential impact on the labor market. And so how do we position ourselves in such a way that we can benefit from the advantages of AI while minimizing its negative impact on society? And it's a tool. Every tool can be used for good or for evil by the people who wield it. And so if we look at what happened in the US movie industry recently, with all the agitations about the potential AI's impact on the creative sector and the possible loss of jobs, it is cutting across everywhere. So we need to balance it by engaging in a lot of advocacy to enable people understand that, like everything else, the benefits far outweigh the dangers, and then working to minimize the dangers as well. And we can do that by assisting our regulators to also be up to speed on the challenges out there and how to mitigate it. Now, you don't want to overregulate it so that you stifle the growth of the sector. You cannot also allow it to just mushroom out of proportion without any guidance, and by so doing, feel the full brunt of the negative impact. So this year, under the Ghana Digital Acceleration Project, which is being funded by the World Bank, and I see them here in the room. So this is a subtle nudge to them to speed up the implementation of this project as well. We're going to have a regulatory sandbox through which all the regulators, the NCA, NITA, and all the others, the Data Protection Authority as well, can sit and then map out the strategies that we're going to use to guide our full-scale implementation of all these AI-assisted tools as well.
Thank you. Please answer of the minister. This is our live conversation on AI as a catalyst for transformation in Africa, and we're live here at Accra. I want to go to Patrick next. Too many questions for you. Software engineer, Microsoft, dial-up internet many years ago, AI, we're all worried. Usually you give me a sense of reality when it comes to technology. Are you optimistic? Are you scared? Are you cool? What's going to happen with AI before I even get to education? Just give me a sense of how I should feel about this buzz around generative AI and what's going to mean for all of us.
Well, I am mostly optimistic. I think it's going to be a wonderful enabler across the economy in different sectors.
In terms of what it means for education, we need to give her an award for the most optimistic public official I've ever seen. Optimism is her middle name, so she's Georgieva, Optimism, add the rest of the names. So Patrick, you're optimistic. What does it mean for example, how your students learn, right? Because some people are saying, people don't want to learn anymore. LLM is going to make it easier for them to cheat, for example. So as a university founder, who's also an engineer, talk to us about what this means for your students and how you process knowledge.
All right, so that's a very interesting question. The LLMs are such a powerful tool that students who use them can use them to an extent where it actually disables learning because you have the machine doing the work for you. But for us, the way we look at it is we say to students there are different kinds of assignments that they're given. So there are going to be some assignments where they're not supposed to collaborate with anyone, not to use any agent, human or otherwise, and it's supposed to be individual work. And instructors are very clear about that because we want them to learn the fundamentals themselves. There will also be assignments where they are required actually to work with other agents. So for example, they might be given an assignment where it's a team effort. They're supposed to work with other humans on a project. they might be given assignments where they're supposed to use a machine intelligence as part of the project. And it's the thing that's interesting about this is, I think for the first time when I talk about, this question of whether to use technology or not, we've always thought of technology as just tools. And for the first time, I find myself using an analogy of teamwork with other humans to say that a machine might be a member of your team is a really sort of profound place to be, but it is a reality of the workplace now, that they're going to go out into industry, and they're going to work with other people, they're going to work with machine intelligence to get things done faster and better, and it is our job to prepare them for that world.
So what do you tell your computer science professors or your students, right? Tomorrow morning, because of course when Ashesi started, things were moving fast, but not this fast, right? So what would you say to them in terms of making sure we're ready for the kind of world that they would grow up and live in?
Is the same thing I said to them 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, if you remember when Ashesi was starting, we were giving team assignments to students, and many universities thought teamwork was not correct. You wanted to really focus on what does this individual know. Well, we ended up making teamwork one of the core learning outcomes for Ashesi, and another core learning outcome for Ashesi is technological competence. And so we want students to be competent in the technology of the time. But beyond this, I think that there are very fundamental things that we should all be teaching in universities. It's really important to think about mindset. It's very important to think about work ethic. It's very important to think about ethical thinking and critical thinking and design thinking and systems thinking. And all of these we have to do. And so not just focus on just the technology per se, but these sort of important broad ways of thinking, because that's what ends up giving us the productivity that we need.
Round of applause for Patrick, please. Thank you. Now, Jason, I'm sort of working my way backwards here because I should have started with you in a way, but it's fine. No. It's fine. And by the way, the internet outage, Google has been on all your platforms. I understand is it the Equium cable? It's right. Working. So a round of applause to Google. I don't know if you saw this coming. Yeah. Thank you. Google has always been prescient, right? But help us, how epochal is generative AI, like steam engine, electricity, internet? Is it as wild, using a Ghanaian expression, as it's been made to seem? Is it that different in terms of how it's going to change everything? Or are we making so much of it just because we understand it?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you to your excellencies, your honor, and thank you for being part of this, inviting me to this distinguished panel. Yes, AI is novel. So one way to think about it, it cuts across all sectors, healthcare, manufacturing, finance, transportation, education, and it's not just an improvement in efficiency, but it is fundamentally different. AI can help solve complex problem solving tasks. There's real-time language translation. This is incredible. The generative capabilities that you mentioned, we can generate text documents, images, videos, we can summarize documents, and these creative capabilities are quite radical, and we can use AI for scientific breakthroughs, including the investigation of AI itself. What I want to emphasize is that there's an opportunity here for Africa to leapfrog into the new economy by when we use AI in an effective way. So I'll illustrate with a few examples that we're working on here in Ghana. So in our lab that we have here in Accra, we employ engineers and scientists from across Africa, Cameroon, Senegal, Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Africa, Ghana, of course. And we focus on using AI to address problems that are relevant to Africa. So I'll mention a few of those. One is weather forecasting. Agriculture is incredibly important in Africa, and accurate weather forecasts can help advise you when to plant, what the pest load is going to be, what about diseases. But unfortunately, weather forecasts in Africa are terrible. They're really not, currently they're not much better than looking it up in a book for the typical weather for this day. And we're using AI technology to develop weather forecasts that are accurate using novel data sources, including satellites. And this AI technology is relatively cheap. There are great weather forecasts in the US and Europe. Those forecasting tools are extremely expensive. They require national kinds of budgets. AI technology, in contrast, is within reach of African meteorological organizations. Another effort we're working on, Africa is extremely linguistically diverse. There are thousands of languages spoken here. We work to collect language data so that we can provide tools like automatic language translation, real-time language translation. In fact, we worked with Professor Isaac Weif at University of Ghana to collect data for Ghanaian languages, including Twi, Akan, Ga, Dagara, Dagbani. These tools provide accessibility to African audiences. And I'll give a third example that I think illustrates how we can improve, we can assist skills. The population is growing rapidly in Africa. We expect the population to double over the next 30 years or so by 2050. This is quite rapid. And unfortunately, over 800 women each day die due to preventable causes during pregnancy, and this is largely due to lack of diagnostic tools. For instance, ultrasound, which is a main diagnostic tool for observing the fetus, that equipment costs on the order of $100,000 to $300,000 and requires 2 years of training to utilize it, making it out of reach of most parts of Sub-Saharan Africa. Fortunately, recently there is cheaper equipment, but that doesn't address the training problem. So we have been working with, together with Jacaranda Health in Kenya to use AI technology. It runs on a smartphone. You take this cheaper ultrasound equipment, it's a wand, it costs on the order of $3,000 to $5,000. And using the AI technology, you can instruct an untrained, relatively untrained, unskilled worker to use that. The instructions are to move, to a midwife or a nurse, move this device over the patient's abdomen. Then the AI assembles that result into an ultrasound that supports a diagnosis. So this is addressing a real problem. It's also creating a way for workers to perform a task that was not possible before.
Thank you, Jason, for those examples. My last question for you before I sort of mix it up is, look, they call you the big four: Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook. One author infamously called you the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Even with what we know, we see, particularly in the US and Europe, a lot of discussions with regulators about what's ethical, children accessing Facebook and this kind of things. There's a lot of concern that even with the known, these large companies, sometimes the ethics are very movable in terms of governance and regulation. What commitment is Google AI making to us that whatever happens with generative AI, you're going to commit yourself to being ethical in the deployment, being conscious of the low internet literacy, digital literacy, particularly in SSA, right? Just, the world is watching. Tell us what you say in relation to that before I mix it up here.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I would point back to Google's AI principles. Chief principle is that AI should be beneficial, should not be misused. It should be free from bias. And there are technical ways to assure that it's unbiased, that we can address, and that it's beneficial. Now, on the technical side, we have ways to ensure that this, to help ensure that this technology cannot be misused. This needs to be done in collaboration with governance, right?
Wonderful. Put your hands together for the panel. Let me come to the managing director, and I'm sort of borrowing from economics to ask my next question. So I see how globally, when there's like high inflation, the monetary guys are trying to cool off. They raise the rates, but the fiscal guys are thinking about poor people. So monetary is contractionary, fiscal is expansionary. So it's always confusing. They need to move together, right? You talked about the growth potential of AI, but there's also the inequality possibility of AI. It's another tension, right? So what are your thoughts around how we can benefit from the growth, but reduce the inequality distorting effects of growth from AI?
Well, let me step back. I used an image of tsunami, and actually that is not the most appropriate image, because tsunami means destroy everything. It's actually a more appropriate image would be a very fast coming tide. It gets boats up, but it also sinks some boats. So the question for us is, why would the tide sink some boats? It would be because people are deprived of access to education and access to opportunities. We live in a world that is the richest it has ever been, and yet nearly 800 million people are hungry. So we do have inequality before AI, and the question is, would AI reduce or increase inequality? To make sure that it reduces inequality, there are, in my view, three critical investments countries must make. The first one is in human capital, investing in people. And that is, I cannot imagine gaining from AI the fullest if that investment is not made. The second one is in rethinking the social safety nets on which vulnerable people rely. I am a proponent of social safety ropes, giving people a chance to help themselves. And that is beyond education. It is access to technology, access to the internet. It is, in my view, paramount to make access to the internet, access to digital, universal right. And in fact, when I was at the World Bank, there was an assessment that the cost of digitalizing Africa, just putting the physical infrastructure in place, is $15 billion. I mean, $15 billion in $100+ trillion GDP economy, it's not that much, but it has to be universal. And the third one is in really ethics. We nurturing the social fabric that makes us all stronger in a more shock-prone world, meaning communities having the right to voice their concerns, opening up societies for decision-making that is more inclusive. I'm sorry to be so typical IMF, but strong institutions, democratic institutions, that this would make a huge, huge difference.
But for most people listening in Ghana, the sequence would be the macro fundamentals must be right. Prices must be stable. They must have access to credit.
Yep.
Then they must have the lights on. Then they must have internet they can pay for before they can think about AI. Is that the sequence in which you should think about this?
Look, what we learned from the pandemic, think about it. The most important lesson. Countries with strong fundamentals, good fiscal, good monetary policy, they withstood the shock of the pandemic better than countries with weak fundamentals. The very same way people with strong immune systems withstood the shock from the virus. I lived in a country that benefited from IMF program. It was really hard. I can tell you there is no substitute for having economies that are functioning really well. And that fundamentals, this issue of fundamentals applies to our conversation on artificial intelligence as it applies on any other conversation. So, strong fundamentals, people.
Wonderful. Put your hands together for the managing director. Minister Ursula, same question. Fundamentals, right? Power sector. So, whilst AI and all of these things are nice things, they tend to be like an afterthought for us in these parts, because if the lights are off, everybody's in trouble. Nobody wants doom so anymore. If the prices of food are high, a Greek minister is angry. So basically, it's almost like you're always struggling to tell them that this is the future. Invest in it. So when the vice president, for example, said the new economy is digital, he was greeted with a lot of sneer, like, what are you talking about? The fundamentals are weak. Just talk to me about how you hope to work your way to keep, whilst the main thing is the main thing, to still let Ghanaians see that they must allocate more to strengthen our digital infrastructure.
I think the lessons we learned from the pandemic, one, that without digital connectivity it was difficult to do anything at all during the shutdowns or whatever, when we were stuck at home, and the contemporary ones that we're living through currently. So it's important, yes, to keep the lights on and all of that. We need electricity to even power our internet systems. But it is also important, it doesn't have to be an either-or situation. We can develop all these critical systems alongside each other, and we really do need all of that. And we can solve multiple problems if we invest in digital, not least being the unemployment situation. Give our young people the critical skills that they need to engage with the digital world. They can create their own jobs and wean themselves off any support from either their families or the society. Europe is thinking about training 1 million people in AI. Where are we as a continent? We cannot also create another digital AI divide.
Right.
We have to be part of the ongoing conversation, be at the table. I'm glad Google's research center is in Ghana. So the language models that they're developing will take our peculiar situations also into account. But we need to give our young people the critical AI skills that they need so that they can be part of those who will be utilizing these systems for the growth of our economies, enable us to get the revenues that we need to develop all the other sectors. So we need to focus on digital infrastructure, applications, and
Patrick,
skills.
what are you doing on the young people's side? Ashesi is great, but we all can't get into Ashesi. We have millions of people who drop out of secondary school. They can't get into university because it's very expensive. I know you have scholarships and all these things. So based on what Minister is saying, what's the best way to equip our young people to be ready for this future beyond the example of Ashesi?
So that's a very big question, Bernard. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at Ashesi, and then I'll talk about what you guys should be helping us with, if you don't mind. With Ashesi, we've taken the approach of collaborating with universities across the continent, because we recognize that no one institution can handle the scale of the problem alone. And so we've set up a collaborative 7 years ago. We've had professors and deans and vice chancellors from over 400 universities that participate in it. And we are basically sharing everything: curriculum, pedagogy. We're advising each other on how to do better research and all of that. And I think all boats are going to rise because of this effort. I think the question that you ask, though, is a very big, more fundamental question. If we really want to advance, we talk about human capital, we have to educate everyone. And we have to educate them well. It has to be a high-quality education. And high-quality education is expensive, and governments in low and middle income countries are constantly strapped for funding to do all that they need to do, infrastructure, roads, water, all of that. So really, to get this right, we need long-term financing. When I say long-term, like 30 years, financing that is affordable for governments to educate everyone. And sort of have the faith that in 30 years, if we've educated everybody really well, our economies will rise to such an extent that we can pay back that debt. But if the financing is expensive, then you're stuck. You end up with situations like what we're in now in Ghana, where you go into debt that is not sustainable, and you're just stuck. So I would say that it would be really wonderful if the global community could come to a consensus on enabling affordable long-term financing to educate planet Earth. Like, get everybody educated really well, understanding and believing that if we take that long-term view, all boats will rise. And that's a project that's beyond my pace grade, but it's within yours, madam.
So they can help you. Let me end with Jason. Google was the greatest invention until AI came, right? So, but one of the things you did which was impressive was you didn't just say we have the greatest invention, search is wonderful, and all of these things you're doing. You actually laid a subsea cable to make sure it's always on in Africa. So my question is, do you have an Africa AI strategy beyond the examples and the use cases? What's Google thinking around Sub-Saharan Africa, and what are you going to put in place to make sure we don't miss out?
Yeah, I want to actually add to what Patrick said. So we live in a time with enormous opportunities and enormous challenges across the board, not just AI. But AI is a tool that we can use for our benefit. As I said before, we want, in the ideal case, what we want from AI is to leapfrog into the new economy. We want to provide skills that are going to give workers what they need to be productive, to build our economies. We need some part in training to train people how to use AI effectively. On the positive side of this, AI is a technology that can benefit us in many different ways. Key, AI technology is much cheaper, tends to be much cheaper than other technologies that are out there. I talked about weather forecasting. AI technologies are relatively cheap in that regard, making them accessible within Africa. That's one aspect. In regard to teaching, it's not just that we have to go it alone. We talked about LLMs. What is the role of LLMs in education? Is it just for plagiarizing? Is it just for cheating? It's not. That's not the only way that you can use it. These are also tools that you can use to accelerate training. The AI technology is a mechanical tool that you can use to interact with students and teach them abilities. In our economies, we're going to see workers have to retrain for new tasks over their lifetimes, perhaps multiple times. AI assistants can help them in that retraining. And this is particularly useful in Sub-Saharan Africa, where we can use this technology to lift our lower skilled workers and give them skills that are comparable to higher skilled workers in other parts of the world. So I see it as a great equalizer. That's the strategy that we want to.
Please put your hands together for the panel. Thank you very much indeed. So in summary, what's my key takeaway? With most things, there are winners and losers, right? So I see two tensions here, right? So we know that AI will make some people's work easier to do, but somebody may lose his job. That's the way life works, right? We know AI will stimulate growth, but it could also bring more inequality. So the key is to be ready. Now, the 4 big points you mentioned, Managing Director, I think I'll use those to conclude in the sense that I'll allocate one of each 4 to you. So digital infrastructure, that's you. You're going to make sure the lights are on, the cables are working, the internet is flowing. That's your job, right? Human capital development, flexibility of that. Patrick, you are the arrowhead for that. Make sure everybody's educated in Ghana. Talk to the education minister. Whatever you have to do it. Then innovation. Google, that's you, right?
Yep.
You're going to make sure you keep innovating. You keep pushing the envelope within the parameters of good regulation and governance and ethics, which she has already been doing. She's been doing that for the past 4 years. Put your hands together for the panel one more time. We've been talking here in Accra, the Gateway to Africa, hosting everything, hosting the IMF Managing Director, AI as a catalyst to transform economies in Sub-Saharan Africa. The blueprint is clear. We're very excited about this. We're going to invite Minister of Finance to join the panel for a photo. This is a historic one. After which we would invite the dignitaries to help file out. And those of you who are here, just smile. We're still live on air. Please smile. Let them know you're happy. So we'll take one with you sitting, and then you rise and take one. Check it out. The anthem is going. Whilst we're at it, let me acknowledge the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison. I did not see your arrival. Put your hands together for Dr. Addison. Thank you, Doc, for being here. Obviously, you've met the Managing Director already. The journalists are waiting to have a bit of the MD. Please rise for another photo. Please rise for another photo. So the journalists are ready as well. Acknowledging all our partners, development partners who are here. Give us a wave, development partners. We also have, yes, thank you very much. We also have a lot of fintechs and tech entrepreneurs. Can you give